Okay, so we're looking at chapter 6 today. This is going to be, actually, I guess this is day 5, but totally this is day 6, because we did nothing for day 5 essentially. So we are looking at kind of day 6 here, which is going to be all about like cardio today. So we're working our way through like an OPT template, right? Like we started with the warm-up section. And we're going to kind of finish up the warm-up section today. We did technically we did the stretching and stuff, and cardio is actually, you learn it when we're learning part of the warm-up, because you do just like 5 minutes of cardio or something as part of the warm-up. However, obviously, like cardio can also just be its entire own workout, right? Like you can just go to the gym to do like a 60-minute cardio session or whatever. So that's okay too. So this writing out like cardio routines can sometimes be a little challenging. What I like to do is, and I often just explain it to my clients, but I like to, when I'm doing like a regular workout, I like to have like my SMR and my flexibility, and then a little bit of cardio, and then go into the actual workout, right? Like then it gets into the movement prep and then all the normal stuff. When I write cardio routines on just a cardio routine, and I have to put it on an OPT template because NASM doesn't have like a cardio template, I'll do the warm up as like SMR and then my stretching. And then normally like cardio would be in that section of boxes, but I move it down to the resistance section. And so it kind of looks something like this, where if you're doing steady state cardio, yeah, you can put it, SMR, stretches, warm up, and then workout. You can either put it in the warm up section and it can just be there, and it's like, there's your 30-minute workout. And then you kind of pivot straight into the cool down. That's kind of a very traditional way to do it. I also really like if we kept the resistance section, and actually I need to grab a resistance section here real quick. Then it can look something like this instead. This is actually my preferred method. I prefer to just go and move my warm up down here, and there's technically what we're talking about. And so it's like, one set of the one, and then I guess my cool down would be there as well. So there we go. Oh God, they're mulching trees outside my house. Ugh. So that's, I almost prefer to like write it this way, where it looks something, actually this isn't really gonna work. Where I'll put it in the resistance section. But we got an example cardio routine that I'm going to show you guys here. And we'll build one at the end of the workout and then send that out to everybody. But this will have basically a phase 2 and a phase 5 cardio routine for both. And you guys can kind of see what that looks like. So that's where we're going today. After we kind of get through the PowerPoint, we'll kind of build this. It's actually going to be a pretty short day. The cardio stuff is on its own little island here, and it isn't the largest section in the world. But it is, again, our fit principles, NASM loves. I like to point out for you guys whenever there's like good question content, like, do I think the fit principles are the most important thing that a trainer should know? Not really. Do I think that you are definitely going to get questions related to them though? Absolutely. So this is the kind of stuff that we spend a little bit of extra time on just to memorize. So introing everything, again, we know that childhood obesity is rising in this country. We do know that there is an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, or just chronic disease in general. It doesn't necessarily even have to be cardiovascular. It could be metabolic, associated with like low activity. We know that cardio is really great for combating both these things, right? Cardio is a really great way to burn lots of calories, and so that fights obesity. We also know that like running in particular, which is sort of the most accessible version of cardio that's out there, is considered a weight-bearing exercise. And we know that weight-bearing exercises are exercises that work against gravity rather than some other type of resistance. You know, gravity-based exercise is the stuff that increases bone density, which can also reduce other chronic diseases like osteoporosis and things like that. So we really like our cardio, you know, well, we say we like cardio. I know not everybody in the world loves cardio. It's either your favorite thing or your least favorite thing. There's like nobody who's like in between on cardio. But we want to, you know, we definitely want to make sure that we incorporate it into our adult routines, but also our youth routines. And so it's very practical because it's a great way to simply just get out and move a lot. But cardio for kids, which are usually very game-based or very much based in the style, the kind of stuff that we did on Friday with the SAQ, is really fun, you know, like it can be very entertaining. So like on Friday, we really, you know, we talked briefly about it when we were talking about like energy systems and work to rest ratios and things like that. But it's not that you can't do, you can totally do SAQ and make it feel like cardio. You just need to limit the rest and understand that you're not going to get the best results when it comes to developing speed, agility, or quickness. Like I always tell people this, but like speed, agility, and quickness training is often performed as cardio, but it's not really cardio. It's much more closely related to strength training, because the idea is that like you are doing super intense bursts of exercise followed by long recovery periods, just like you do when you're lifting weights, right? You lifted such a heavy weight that you have to, like, it's very intense, so your body goes, whoa, that was intense, I need to develop and get stronger, right? Versus, you know, when you do like high repetitions, your body doesn't really have as strong of an immune response, which is why we typically, which is one of the reasons why we typically associate like high repetition exercise with leaning down and low repetition exercise with like bulking up, because one has a much more robust like response. That's kind of how SAQ training is. Like SAQ training is meant to be very intense with lots of recovery so that, you know, you are fully recovered so you can work intensely again. We're going to kind of shift that paradigm when we're talking about kids though, because kids, again, they don't really have that ability to be intense, right? So they don't really have an anaerobic metabolism, at least not a very well developed one, right? They are really strictly aerobic athletes. And so we are going to do SAQ in a way that is very cardiovascular based rather than very like phosphagen based, right? We're going to very much have them in that aerobic system, limited rest ratios, which is great because that's going to keep them moving. They're going to have a super fun time, and it's going to build some coordination, which is really, really, really great. So that's kind of some of the stuff we talked about on Friday and how it sort of applies to our cardio talk today. So the rationale behind doing all this, obviously we know that, again, obesity is reaching epidemic levels where we're seeing extremely high rates of it in this country in particular. But we do know that like if we participate in all this exercise, there is a decreased risk of obesity, which again decreases your risk for those diseases. But some of the other benefits that are like kind of intangible, rather than just measuring like how someone's heart rate improves or measuring their blood pressure, the other intangible differences that are really positive are things like we see improved mood, improved self-esteem, and like we start to see like global health improve. And when I say global health, I just mean like overall, like all the things just in general, that's like a healthy, resilient person, right? You know, maybe they're not the world's most athletic person, but we definitely know that they are in general very healthy, right? So that's actually one of the, just really quickly pivoting on like that concept of like global health. This is like one of the differences between like earlier generations and now. Like one of the things that we are seeing is like, you know, there was a lot more work to be done back in the day. It was and there was just were not as much access to like processed foods back in the day. And so like we are starting to see these generations that don't live as long as like their parents did. And that's kind of crazy because like theoretically your genes are, you know, their genes. And so like you should be living pretty similarly, but we're seeing that rate like stagnate. You know, like increases in modern technology, you would think that like the rate, like life expectancy would only go up, but we're starting to see it be pretty stagnant actually. And that is a lot to do with the fact that like some generations grew up eating very processed foods and being very sedentary, and we're just not seeing those often in the past. So that's why when I say like global health, it's like you could see somebody who might weigh more than someone else, and you look at them, it's like, oh, well, clearly, like, you know, this person's healthier, but like all their blood work and other things, like all the other stuff going on in their body is just like out of whack. And that's definitely sort of a key concept there. I'm talking, we don't do a lot on global health, but global health is like an interesting concept. Cardiorespiratory system, just as a quick review, again, that's going to be your heart, your blood, and your blood vessels. That's the cardiovascular part. And then there's also the respiratory system, which is your respiratory pump and your respiratory passageway. So everything we're talking about today improves all of those things. So when we're looking at our FIT principles, right? I know you guys have seen these a million times, but again, these little like definitions like this are just such meaty test questions. You just want to flashcard this stuff and get it like you know, you guys know me. I don't like memorization as like a concept when it like I don't like it as a foundation. I think that like memorization should be there to like supplement your ability to like reason with people and be like when explain to people like why you have like certain, you know, statistic based opinions. Well, why should I do, you know, cardio 3 times a week? Because frequency, which is referred to as the how many often you do, you know, like it allows you to kind of like pull that information. So definitely get these memorized at the end. You know, at the end of the day, here's my advice: memorize these, get them on flashcards, make sure you know your FIT principles inside and out. I can't guarantee you're going to get questions about them, but I can guarantee that you could get questions related to them. So what are they? What are our FIT principles, right? They are the cardiorespiratory guidelines that help trainers create effective, safe, and fun cardio routines. FIT, by the way, or at least the FITT part of it, is not just a NASM concept. I think I've explained this before, but like NASM's not the only ones who use FIT principles. Actually, every personal training certification out there uses FIT principles. It's a general concept for trainers to have to know more than it is something that NASM came up with to help, you know, students like memorize cardio routines. So that's actually kind of an important big deal because like this is also something that's again kind of shows you something that's definitely going to be on your test. The only thing that NASM did that's like slightly unique is they added the E on the end of it. Because like, you know, again, you could write the world's greatest routine, but if you can't get someone to do it because they hate the program, something to consider. So again, cardiorespiratory guidelines, right? So frequency, right, which is the first one, it refers to the number of training sessions in a given time period. So generally, when we're monitoring frequency, we're usually talking in 1 week periods. Sometimes we'll talk in 2 week periods, like let's say you're doing a cardio routine mixed with your strength routine. You're strength training 4 days a week and you're doing cardio twice per week, right? But let's say you have 3 cardio workouts. You want to work on 3 primary components. You want to work on distance, you want to work on speed, and you want to work on like your ability to run hills, right? And control your heart rate. So maybe those are 3 like components of your cardio routine, but you're only doing 2 cardio routines per week. So it's like, how do I like do that? Well, then you can measure your frequency. It's still technically in a 1 week period, but you can consider it over a 2 week period. And so week 1, you do, let's say you're doing strength training on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday, right? Week 1, you could do your cardio workout A, you've got workout B, and you've got workout C. You could do A on Wednesday and B on Saturday. Next week, you do C on Wednesday. Then you go back to A on Saturday. So that's a 2 week period that we would, if we look at it, you know, you can move from 1 week to another. But generally, as a general rule of thumb, we're going to measure frequency in 1 week periods. You know, 3 days of strength training, 2 days of cardio. 4 days of strength training, 2 days of cardio. 3 days of strength training, 3 days of cardio. Whatever, you know, depending on who your athlete is. For kids, that's probably what it's going to look more like. You're going to definitely be much more cardio based than anything. The next one on the FIT principles is going to be intensity. This is the level of demand placed on the body during your activity. So like during your whatever type of exercise it is that you're doing. That's what we're talking about, intensity. Typically, we are going to measure this with a percentage of heart rate max. That's the one that's like very specific and very, very number based and very measurable, right? And often I'd say that's the one that I kind of almost probably too often give most examples of. Because I think that like at this day and age, we've got so much access to heart rate monitoring and things like that, that it's pretty easy to know what your heart rate is. Also, there is always just like, there's a clock on the wall, count it for 6 seconds, add a 0. Like that's not really that hard. So I personally really love heart rate max measuring in terms of intensity, but there's also a couple other terms that we definitely want to know here, like the RPE scale. So typically we're going to measure it as a percentage of heart rate max, right? Or a percentage of maximum effort. So if we know, like, let's say we know like the original version, right? We know our traditional heart rate max formula is 220 minus your age. So if we've got a 40-year-old person, 220 minus 40, that's 180. If I want them to be at 75% of their max heart rate, I go 180 times 0.75. And there we go. I would be like, Bob, I want you at a heart rate of 135. I want you to be as close to that as possible today for 20 to 30 minutes. Bob's going to go, great, cool, super specific. And he's getting on that treadmill. He's going to watch TV, watching the highlights of football now that it's back. And he's on the treadmill and he checks every few minutes to make sure. He's like, oh, crap, hits that plus sign. And then, keeps himself right where he needs to keep him. That's not a bad method, right? That's just 220 minus your age. However, it's not very specific to Bob, right? So now we got to take a look at like, what if Bob's really good at cardio? Let's say he's got a resting heart rate of 59 beats per minute, right? So now we got to do the Karvanen version. So we take 220 minus his age of 40, right? And then that's his max heart rate. Now we also have to subtract from that number his resting heart rate, which we know is 59 beats per minute. Then we multiply that by 0.75. Whoops. I mean, that's pretty close, but no, 0.75. And then we got to tack his resting heart rate back on afterwards. So plus 59. So now Bob's target heart rate is going to be 149.75. So I'm going to say, Bob, I want you to be really close to 150 for 20, 30 minutes. You say, great, right? And that would give him a much more specific version. It doesn't matter which formula you use. Those are both a percentage of your heart rate max. So we would call that your target heart rate, right? And that's your intensity. It's your target. It's targeting your specific heart rate. Now, if you got a client who just doesn't have a heart rate monitor, they don't really have the means by which they can do that, or if you're just trying to explain to someone how hard they should be working like mid-workout, you can teach your client the RPE method, or the Borg scale as it's more commonly referred to. And so the RPE method is the rating of perceived exertion scale. And it's a scale from 6 to 20 that measures intensity, right? With 6 being like no exertion and 20 being like maximal exertion, right? So here's our Borg scale right over here. Exercise starts around like an 11. What I like to consider like stabilization style exercise, like if it's strength training, starts around like a 14 in my opinion. So you're getting in here like a 14, 16, and 18, right? I like to think of that as like, somebody who's working pretty hard, they're getting a little out of breath. Here's somebody who's working like strength training, like really hard, they're probably going to need plenty of rest. And then this is somebody who's like working like super, super hard. 19, and 20 are extremely hard. Those are like full on sprints with super, super, super intense amounts of rest afterwards. And so we don't actually get into these all that often. I would say this is very much like a max strength thing. Now, it can also be applied to cardio, obviously, right? Like if I were, doing like full on max effort sprints where afterwards I'm like, like literally just like, heaving, trying to get my breath back. Yeah, I'm probably like perceiving my effort somewhere down here, which means this is probably somewhat tied to those super high heart rate numbers. That's also, if you've ever wondered, by the way, for those of you who, haven't seen the Borg scale that often, if you're wondering why it's 6 to 20, which is the weirdest scale in the world, why not do 1 to 10? All right. The reason for that is because the idea here is that like 60 is no exertion, or 6 is no exertion at all. That's around a resting heart rate of like 60. Um, and then we have like a 20, which is like a max heart rate of like somebody who's like hitting 200. The idea is that these are sort of corresponding with like the low ranges of heart rate to like the super high ranges of heart rate. And so you'll notice that they do kind of like somewhat go, well, we looked at Bob, right? Or Bob's original formula before we did the carbon inversion, right? He was around like a 130 something. So like, and then we were around like a 150 something here. So Bob was between a 13 and a 15 on the RPE scale, which corresponded with 75% of his max heart rate, which is zone 1, just barely almost shifting into zone 2, right? Which we're kind of seeing here. So that's kind of the Borg scale and what we're talking about. By the way, see the 11 here, by the way, like 11 on the Borg scale, that right there is the 150 minutes of exercise that you need to get per week according to the CDC, right? 150 minutes is just not that much time, that's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week of light activity. 11 is kind of like going for a walk. So anyway, that's a fun method. Now, that's another really good way to do this. You also can modify your Borg scale. Like the Borg scale has been getting more and more popular in the world of like powerlifting, in the world of like weightlifting and stuff in the last few years. You're seeing a lot more like Olympic weightlifting coaches and a lot of like strength training coaches. They're starting to use RPE scales, but they are definitely basing it more on like a scale of 1 to 10. And they're talking about how like this should be like a 7 on the Borg scale. It's like a 7 out of 10 in terms of intensity. You shouldn't be, pushing yourself to maximal exertion, but it should be hard, But that just goes to show you like how great the Borg scale is. Like it's a very helpful thing to kind of, and the more you use it with your clients, the more accurate it gets, If you're like, hey, Robert, I want you to go like a 14 on the Borg scale. And then I'm coaching you and I notice that you're like, I'm like, all right, we need to reevaluate what you think a 14 is, because that was like a 16 or an 8 or an 18. Like, let's bring it back a little bit. It's like, oh, really? Oh, great. And then like, the more you use it, the more familiar they get with it and it gets even better. So that's the rating of perceived exertion scale. We've also got the talk test method. And the talk test method is also a really helpful way for measuring intensity. This works really well without your clients needing to even know that you're doing it to them. But you can literally just interview your client and ask them questions related to how they're feeling during the workout. And if you notice that they're really breaking all of their sentences while they're trying to be polite and reply to you, right? All right, this is meant to be a zone 1 day. Let's go ahead and bring that intensity back, right? Like, this is meant to be long distance cardio. I want you to be able to kind of talk the entire time, right? Versus like, maybe it's moderate intensity cardio, where like, I want you to sort of be broken, but like in your sentences, but you should be able to like, kind of bounce back and forth between being able to talk and being a little out of breath. And then we have like, super intense, which is like, you should not be able to talk, the minute you open your mouth, the only thing that should come out of there is like, vomit. That's your maximal exertion. That's so harsh. No, I'm kidding, but but that's the talk test method, right? And that's also really effective. I love using the talk test method. Normally when I talk about the talk test method, I also talk about like a sneaky thing that I do as a trainer. This is totally just me being like sneaky, but I'm already like, I'm a big high fiver. Like I love giving high fives, like when I'm training my clients. But I will actually just in my own version of assessment, and this is totally inaccurate considering that like, blood flow is different for everybody, but I will often pay attention to like how hot my clients' hands are. And if they're kind of cold, I'm like, we need to get that blood pumping a little more. Like, that's like a sign that like, let's warm you up, But even that's like a form of assessing, you're just sort of taking in information and using it to inform your decisions. So Next one, so that's frequency and intensity. Next one we're going to look at is time. Time is the length of time spent in whatever particular activity you're doing, right? And so the recommended activity, we definitely know this, and this is another statistic that you'll want to have memorized. The recommended activity for most individuals is 150 minutes of low intensity activity per week. That is the amount that we've sort of determined is the bare minimum for having really positive effects at like reducing your risk for a lot of chronic diseases. If we could just get people active 150 minutes per week, we would see disease rates drop pretty drastically, but we just can't. We just don't see that much activity. And it's really, like I said, not that intense. It's 30 minutes a day, you know? Like we live in the age of like audiobooks, you know? Like just carve out 30 minutes to put your earbuds in, walk out the front door and go walking and come back and listen to a chapter of Harry Potter. You know, like that's all we have to do, and we can't. We don't make time for it. And that's why we struggle so much with obesity in this country. Now, here's what's really great. Let's say you can't do that. Let's say you just don't have time to do 30 minutes a day. Well, what if you were to cut that in half by doing a little more intensity? We've seen a drastic reduction in disease at just 75 minutes of moderate intensity activity per week, or moderate to high. So like if we could just get, 15 minutes of like HIIT training, does anybody know what the Tabata is? The Tabata is a really just a simple high intensity interval training method. It is 20 seconds of work followed by 10 seconds of rest for 8 rounds. You guys should totally practice. We should do, next time we get together, we should do a Tabata just so you can kind of feel it. Tabatas are a really great tool for trainers because they can be really high intensity work and it only takes 4 minutes. So like if you ever end a session on like early, you're just like, man, we flew through that today. I must have shirked you on rest or something happened, like, and you get through your session early. It's like, you don't want to just be like, all right, well, that was the end of the workout. Goodbye. You can be like, well, we got an extra 4 minutes. Let's go ahead and do a fun little Tabata. And so it's like you do like a little 4-minute finisher as like for fun. It's a great way to kind of fill some time, especially in like a group exercise class where maybe you didn't write a routine that is long enough for your boot camp or whatever. You can be like, all right, we're going to do 3 Tabatas here, right? And that's 12 minutes of time. And you know that it's exactly 12 minutes of time because you just go 20 seconds on, 10 seconds of rest for 8 rounds, which is 4 minutes. And you do 3 of those, 4, 8, 12. So Tabatas are a really cool thing. And there's something you can do anywhere, right? Like if we get that 75 minutes of moderate intensity, right? If somebody's at the office and they got 4 free minutes, right? Just 20 seconds, rest for 10, 20 more seconds, rest for 10, 8 rounds of that. It's not a bad way to get your heart rate up, and it reduces our risk of disease. We can't make time for that. The recommendation for youths, though, is going to be a little bit different. So this is one thing that's unique to this class that I do want you guys to know. Our recommendations for youth are 60 minutes of daily activity. So that's definitely way, way, way more than we see in adults, right? 150 minutes per week. We're going to be hitting that on day 2.5, and so for youths, we're recommending daily activity, bare minimum 60 minutes per day. So you'll want to have kind of all 3 of those memorized. Now, time, when we're referring to it, does not just refer to these 3 recommendations. Time refers to anything. Obviously, if you're going to train for a marathon, right, which is a very long, several hour event, well, then the time of training is going to need to be several hours worth, But so time can be anything, but the ones that we kind of tie these statistics to that make, these are sort of the chunks that like they love to ask you questions related to these. These 3 little statistics here are very relevant to time. So get those, in addition to memorizing what time is on the FIT principles, definitely have those 3 numbers memorized as well. Now, when you're writing a cardio program, the type is the choice of activity being performed. Your choices are going to be different depending on who your client is. For instance, like if you're training a runner, it doesn't really make that much sense to do swimming as your cardio. You know, it can be a great way to do a little bit of cross training, which can be a good plateau buster, or it can be a really good way to take some of the weight off if they're having impact problems. There's definitely like some cross skills there, and that's why we have cross training. Like cross training is helpful. You know, weights help with cardio, cardio helps with weights. Running can be effective for like breaking a plateau and helping a runner. Going for a swim can help a cyclist. You know what I mean? Using the rowing machine can be good for anybody. But generally type is like, we know that function follows form, and we know that like specific workouts that are related to whatever activity we're doing, that's super important to us, right? So we do know that like when it comes to your type, you do want to primarily focus on whatever it is you are training for. If your client is, you know, never going to be a long distance runner, but they do a lot of strength training, well, their cardio can be strength training based. You know, they can do circuit training, battle ropes, barbells, and kettlebells and things like that. Cool, still cardio. You know, cardio is just getting your heart rate elevated for X, you know, whatever amount of time. So choices are going to be different for any client that you got, but the activity that elevates your heart rate is going to be considered cardio. So running, hiking, biking, swimming, jumping rope, circuit training, all of it, it all counts as cardio. And that's one of the things that like, I think is also another reason why people say they hate cardio. I think people hate running. Doesn't mean you have to hate cardio, you know? Playing pickup basketball, that's totally cardio, you know what I mean? So for youths, this is a huge thing because it's definitely going to be tied to our last concept here as well. So we want to create unique, fun, and engaging activities. This is why we like circuit training, we like games, and we like sports like drills so much. This is why we did a lot of SAQ on Friday, right? Because that SAQ stuff is super fun and engaging. It gives them something to focus on, and it's a great way to sort of get the heart rate elevated. And you can play a lot of fitness games, you know, like games are so fun for kids. I mean, they're fun for adults too. Sadly, the one thing we didn't have on Friday was large enough numbers to play adult Duck Duck Goose. But man, do I love playing Duck Duck Goose with adults. It's so much more competitive and hilarious to watch people like get super like amped up like in the most nonsensical doesn't matter thing. It's a blast. Like I really enjoy playing it with adults. Also, like red light, green light, we didn't play too much of that, but that's a really fun with adults because you can also do things like bear crawls while you're playing that, which is just super fun. So stuff like that's just, you know, engaging and interactive, and kids love it, you know. So the last thing, which again is NASM specific, they love to they tack this one on, is enjoyment. And the E in FIT principles, right, is the level of pleasure derived from whatever specific activity. So you want to make sure that your activities, again, are fun, they're engaging, you are choosing the things that enhance your clients' adherence to a program. If I know my client hates the treadmill, it is my job as their trainer to design them a program that keeps them away from that treadmill, right? Like that's the job, right? We want to make sure that things are not boring, they're not repetitive. We want to make sure they are somewhat challenging, but they're also enjoyable, you know? And it's going to depend on like who your client is, you know? Some people, they want their cardio. I had a client who was like a really big movie buff. And so like he and I was like, all right, well, let's see. And I was like, let's figure out how to incorporate that. And he put like a DVD player and a TV in his basement because he had like a rowing machine down there and a treadmill. And so we wrote a routine that was like alternating between the two and using both of them. And then we also wrote like a movie schedule. And so I was like, I'm gonna come up with a list of like my favorite movies I think you should watch. And I was like, and you can give me some homework and I'll try to like go through some of these movies. And we traded like our favorite movies that we knew the other person hadn't seen. And that was his homework. It was a really fun way to kind of enhance, like he hated doing cardio, you know? But he did like having those things there. And I'm not a huge fan of watching movies when it comes to doing cardio. I don't really like people not being in tune with their body. I like them to kind of pay attention to what's going on, and be mentally present while they're working out. But that just wasn't working with this guy. It's just not who he was. So I was like, oh, you got to see this movie. And he would download them or whatever. I don't know what he did, but he would watch them. And he would do over several sessions. He would watch them in chunks, which also is a terrible way to watch movies, but whatever. It worked, right? It was a really kind of fun, effective way to enhance his enjoyment. You don't have to worry about that with kids. Again, kids hugely enjoyment is arguably the most important factor when you're training youths. But it's pretty easy to make cardio engaging for kids. You just have to play a lot of games, and you have to make sure that you keep them moving the entire time. If you do that, most of your work is kind of done for you. Do a little bit of SAQ work and just keep them moving. And this is where some of the art form of knowing how to run SAQ sort of comes into play. We were taking plenty of rest in between rounds on Friday, but not doing that is one of the keys to making it real true cardio where it's all right, and the last person's done, everybody back in line, or round two, or you have two separate stations going simultaneously so that they only get so much rest. That's also a really fun way to keep it engaging for kids. And so when we are sort of incorporating all of this, right? Cardiorespiratory training, any type of training that elevates your heart rates for extended periods of time. That's at the end of the day, that's the big method here. Our traditional methods of doing this, right, when it comes to writing a cardio routine, is that we put someone down a treadmill in order to improve their fitness levels, but they hate it, and now they don't ever want to do the treadmill ever again, right? That's sort of the traditional approach, right? What should I do? Go hit the treadmill. I'll see you in an hour, right? Not very engaging, not very fun, pretty boring, right? So instead, what we want to do is we want to write an ASM style integrated cardiorespiratory routines, where we start to incorporate a little bit of creativity into our training. So one of the best ways to do this is circuit training. Circuit training is where you do multiple predetermined exercises in a row with little to no rest in between, right? So the nice thing about circuit training is it's super, super efficient. It is going to not only improve your cardio, but it will also improve your strength training, right? So there's a million really fun circuits out there. There's one that Men's Health put out years ago that a client of mine brought me, and I thought it was so fun. What was it? It was the Spartacus circuit workout. This is from years ago, but they just loved it, and they brought it to me, and I was like, sure, let's do it. Let's have a little fun. And it was literally just, it was 10 exercises for three sets, and it was goblet squat, mountain climbers, kettlebell swings, T push-ups, split lunges, rows, side lunges, and then a push-up to row. And I was like, good God, upper body with a side of more upper body. But you'll notice it's kind of cool, right? It goes from goblet squat to mountain climbers to kettlebell swings to T push. So that is, glutes into shoulders, into glutes and hamstrings, into chest, into legs, upper back. And then this is two kind of total body movements, but lunge with a side touch. So that's very much again, upper body down to the lower body, and then push up to row. But these are both kind of compound movements at the end. And what's really cool about that is that's a very specific type of circuit training called peripheral heart action training, which is where you alternate from upper body to lower body to upper body to lower body. And peripheral heart action circuits are a great way to enhance your cardiorespiratory efficiency, because your body's we got to get blood down to the legs, and all of a sudden it opens up all your blood vessels to the legs, and it constricts all the blood vessels elsewhere in your body. And then all of a sudden you start doing push-ups, your body's we got to get blood to the chest. And so then all of a sudden it restricts the blood vessels in your legs, and it opens it all to your upper body. And then all of a sudden you go back to the lower body, your body's come on, we got to get blood down to the legs, and it's just constant. It's little repetitions for your blood vessels, and it's just a great way to enhance your cardiovascular system. It may not necessarily result in any more cardio, your heart rate's going to remain pretty much the same, but it's helping you do vasoconstriction and vasodilation, which is just so very good for you. So I had a client like bring me that years ago, and I used to use that as one of my staple, like, remember I told you guys about my evil backup routines? That was one of them. And backup routines were always meant to be like, you didn't bring your books, and so I'm going to punish you. And they were really it was really kind of fun. Circuit training is awesome. If you're doing it with youths, generally when it comes down to it, you're probably going to either be doing body weight circuit training, sports performance circuit training, or functional movement circuit training, which are sort of 3 different methods that are actually in the little youth programming manual. So I want to pull an example of these up real quick. Down to cardio. Oh my God, stop it. Yeah. Cardiorespiratory. Page 38. Cool. Get out of here. Okay, scrolling. Okay, so body weight circuit training, right? So for this circuit, each station consists of an exercise in which you are going to do a body weight exercise, right? You're going to do it for 30 to 60 seconds, depending on like where you're at. And you're going to do it for multiple exercises for, 2 to 3 rounds. And so prisoner squats into push-ups, into jumping jacks, into mountain climbers, into lunges, into supermans, into hurdle hops. Weirdly familiar looking compared to the workout that we just found on the internet, right? Not exactly the same, but like a lot of similar movements. That's what's another thing that's so convenient about that other routine, is that it was just simple dumbbells. It was meant to be something that burned a lot of calories very, very easily. This is the same concept, and kids can latch onto this because there's not a lot of moving working parts in something like this, right? It's just a couple very simple exercises. And so, if we did 30 seconds of prisoner squats, gave our client 15 seconds of rest, 30 seconds of push-ups, 15 seconds of rest, 30 seconds of jumping jacks, this is not a bad routine. Hurdle hops at the end there, that's a blast. Just have a little hurdle and they got to jump one side or the other, right? This is a pretty darn good cardiovascular routine. Let's see, how many exercises? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then rest at the end, right? So that's 7 exercises. If you did 30 seconds each, that is 3.5 minutes. You take 15 seconds of rest in between. That would be an additional 2 minutes. So you can get through that whole circuit. You had 60 seconds of rest on at the end. That whole circuit should take you about 10 minutes, right? Rest, do round 2, another 10 minutes. Rest, do round 3, another 10 minutes. 30 minutes of activity right then and there. You switch all these workouts, you switch all this up and do the exact same thing, but just different exercises. This is how I used to run my boot camps. So like when I used to design a boot camp, if I did the most basic boot camp, and one of like just the simplest formats ever is literally just you create a perimeter of exercises, right? So maybe you set up 5 mats here, 5 over here, 5 over here, and 5 over here. You get 20 stations. If you had 10 boot campers, that would be 2 mats per station, which means you only need to pick, instead of 20 exercises, you only need to pick 10 exercises, right? So let's see, let's do this version here, because this is what we said, 7 stations, right? So if you did 7 stations, what's another example of like a squat that's not like a prisoner squat, right? That's a prisoner squat, right? Hands behind the ears, squatting down. What's another squat that's like really similar to that, guys? What's one that you can think of? Top of your head.
Overhead?
Yeah, do an overhead squat? Sure, absolutely, right? So it's like, all right, round 1, we did the prisoner squat. You circle everybody up, they're drinking water, you're halfway through the workout, right? Down round 2, we're gonna do an overhead squat. So you're gonna do the exact same thing we did, only this time we get to keep your arms up. Rather than push-ups, we're gonna do T push-ups for round 2, right? Rather than jumping jacks, we're gonna do split jacks, right? So they'll go back and forth with their legs instead of side to side. Rather than mountain climbers, we're gonna do shoulder taps. Rather than lunges, we're gonna do toe touches, like hinges, right? Rather than Supermans, we'll do planks. Rather than the hurdle hops, we'll do forward hops. There you go. You just changed up your whole circuit by just picking like an exercise that's really similar. You keep the stations in the same spot, and now suddenly your 30-minute workout just became 60 minutes. And it's a great body weight cardio day. Simple, simple, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be fun, engaging, and burn plenty of calories. Now, remember, one thing that we are doing in this example is we are using a very, very basic format. And like I said, our primary goal here is to keep it simple. So we're burning lots of calories. This is not a very specific workout. We're going to spend the rest of this class literally being like, all right, that was a lot of general stuff. Let's talk about how to be specific for clients whose anterior pelvic tilt, right? But we like the non-specific stuff as well. You guys have heard me say this before. Specific is always better than non-specific, but non-specific still has value. And that's kind of the example of what we're seeing there. So that's a body weight circuit, right? Here's another example in the PowerPoint here. They're very simplistic. You can perform it anywhere. No equipment is needed. Lunges, prisoner squats, push-ups, jumping jacks. Okay, it's the same exercise. I mean, that makes sense. It's PowerPoint written from the reading. But there we go, right? And they kind of move through it. Now, another one that's really fun for kids, one that like youths love, and honestly, everybody kind of loves, are sports performance circuits. I find that like a lot of dads love sports performance circuits as well, because it's like a chance to kind of recapture their youth. So I think that's also kind of a fun group that applies this, or like, just any athlete who's like training for their event to be like, all right, you're training, for this triathlon, we're bringing the triathlon into the gym today. And so you're doing your strength training, but then it's like, all right, let's go get on the spin bike. And then they come back and it's like, they're doing more strength training. All right, let's go get on the treadmill. All right, let's end the workout in the pool, that last one's hard. But sports performance circuits, right? These are, exercises that mirror whatever athletic event you're doing, but also might incorporate a little bit of SAQ into your workout. And so you can see this in your reading here as well. And so for this circuit, each station consists of a performance type drill that challenges your SAQ, right? And so you would go through a circuit of squat jumps and then go do a set of 1-ins. Then you're going to do like a side shuffle. Then you're going to go do a box drill. Then you're going to move into a snake drill, then some hurdle hops, and end it with some box run steps, right? A lot of really fun, very much lower body based work here. But again, very cardiovascular, right? So maybe you put somebody on the line and they do some squat jumps, and then they immediately, like once they're done, sprint through a speed ladder and go do some 1-ins, right? Remember, 1-ins is the simple one where it's just 1 foot in each box. Then you set them up and it's like, all right, now you're going to come over here. We're going to do some side shuffling, and then we're going to go do a box drill. Boom, 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 right? Then you lead your client through like a fun snake drill, and that snake drill might go through like some hurdle hops, and then you end it with box run steps. Now, this is very much like a circuit style that I just described. This is a little different than something I would do. Me personally, I mean, I like this, but like a lot of these, in my opinion, don't transfer very well. Like going from a box drill into a snake drill, it's not super efficient if you ask me, but I do love doing straight sets, and you guys kind of experienced this on Friday. I do really like doing like straight sets of a few exercises and then slowly combining them all together until you end up with one giant obstacle course. I do love doing that. And we didn't really get into a really big, I mean, it got a little big, but I love to get it to where it is just massive and like full of moving parts and just becomes really kind of fun. So if you've got multiple speed ladders, break them out. Yeah, squat jumps, 1-ins, hopscotch, all the kinds of fun stuff like that. And then we got functional movement circuits. Now, functional movement circuits, when we say functional, what we mean is like wacky movement circuits. Like these are all the movements that are very non-traditional when it comes to a classic gym environment, right?
So these are often full body exercises. They often move through multiple planes of motion, and they often recruit multiple muscle groups simultaneously. So you guys have probably seen this exercise before where it's like the handovers with the box, right? That's a really fun one. If you did a push-up over here and then hands up top and did a push-up over here, you know, there's a little bit of stability there. There's a little bit of sagittal movement. There's a little bit of frontal plane movement. There's a little bit of transverse movement, right? It's kind of using multiple planes and multiple movements, or even just like total body exercises, right? Like this is a step up. He's doing a step up to balance, but he's got an overhead press here. So that's a step up curl to overhead press. He did a sagittal version where he's stepping this way, but he could easily step to the side and do a frontal version. He could twist and do a transverse version, right? Or a squatting to row, that's functional. Push up with rotation, walkovers, right? All those are really good examples. So a good functional movement circuit, a multiplanar lunge with reach, right? That's basically just where you do that lunge, where you do like one sagittal, and the reach part is where you reach down slightly with the hands. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as a sprinter's lunge, if anybody's ever heard that term, where instead of keeping your body upright during your lunge, you're actually reaching forward. And then you would do a sagittal version, or I'm sorry, you would do a frontal version, and then you would do a transverse version where you reach away. So those are multi-planar lunges because they're, you know, technically 3 reps is 1 rep because you did 1 rep in each plane of motion. Front to back jumping jacks, right? That's the one I was describing earlier. Push up with rotation, squats, single leg medicine ball lift and chop, right? That's such a great exercise that also incorporates balance. All those are really fun because they're total body movements. Now, they're not listed here, but my favorite versions of functional movements are all of the fun animal mobility stuff. Bear crawls, crab walks, duck walking, all of that super fun, you know, kind of engaging, weird animal mobility stuff. Gorilla crawls, oh my gosh. Like all that stuff is so fun. Kids love it, adults love it. I mean, you know, you definitely want to make sure whenever you're doing that functional movement stuff, we know that with any compound movement, we do need to be cautious, and we want to make sure that our client is like, has an established baseline before you do any of this. But it's just such a fun, engaging thing. And because kids are pretty resilient, they don't have a lot of overactive, underactive muscles. There's a lot of play here, you know, which is great for youths. So that is also a great way to get your cardio in. I mean, when was the last time you guys did bear crawls? Actually, Maggie, you probably do bear crawls, right? That's like a boxing thing, isn't it?
No, but I used to teach, I used to be a karate instructor, and we used to do all that stuff.
Yeah, it's so fun.
Duck walk, bear crawl, all of it. Yeah.
It's so fun. And it's great. I mean, like, definitely warm your wrists up. Like, don't forget to warm your wrists up. But it's like, it's such a blast. And like, if you guys want to, it's actually kind of expensive. And the book name is the most ridiculous title ever. But there's a book called The Supple Leopard. And it's a book all about like animal mobility or becoming a supple leopard. And it's a fun, like, it's all about like becoming really mobile and doing all these really fun sort of animal mobility drills and functional movement patterns, kettlebells and things like that. I didn't realize I Googled PDF. Yeah, here's the kind of classic stuff. But it's cool. It just has like a lot of, I guess I only got the one picture there, but there's just a lot of really cool, like, fun stuff. And it was just written by a guy who is really trying to come up with functional ways to incorporate all this weird animal mobility stuff into traditional workouts, you know, which sometimes it's hard to get that stuff to fit. And so like, we don't really cover it a lot in our traditional lessons, but like finding ways to incorporate that stuff, that's part of the art, you know, it's part of the creativity. So at the end of the day, guys, when you're writing circuit training, make sure it's, you know, be creative, try to make sure that your clients are having fun, base it around their interests and their goals, and you're going to be in pretty good shape. You do all that and you don't really have too much to worry about. Do you guys have any questions before we move into sort of the traditional OPT stuff? Feeling good? All right. Just really quickly, obviously it's a program design class, so we have got to go. We got to go through our stages and our zones. Oh shit! I just realized I did have all of the notes and stuff. Here's all the. Oh. Here's all of our circuit training notes and stuff that all the things I kind of just moved through in the PowerPoint. Definitions, and then here's examples of the variations of circuit training. I need to move this up here. I don't know what happened, but I'm all out of order in these like notes from last time. Okay, so let's take a look at our levels here. So if you've got a client and we're looking at the OPT model here, if you got a client in the stabilization phase, right, so that is level, stabilization is phase 1, which means that it's going to correspond with level 1. You are going to be performing stage 1 cardio. So this is where we've got some new terms here, right? Until now, we've said there are levels and we've said there are phases. Cardio gets its own little categories, but they are totally the same concepts, right? Like they totally, they directly correspond. And so in the cardio, you have stages, and within those stages, you have zones. So the 4 like kind of key terms are phases, levels, stages, and zones, right? Think of zones as tools in a tool belt, and think of stages as different tool belts, right? You got a plumbing tool belt, a carpentry tool belt, and a home repair, and a work in your car tool belt, you know, like, and each of those have different tools in them. Maybe there's some crossover, right? You know, maybe you've got a screwdriver in all 3 bags. But let's take a look at this first one here, right? If you've got a client who's in level 1, right? So again, they're in the stabilization level. Stabilization level only has 1 phase, so you instantly know that they're also in phase 1. So level 1 or phase 1, you are going to give your client a stage 1 cardiorespiratory routine. Now, one of the hints that NASM does give you here, they don't say this anywhere in the book, but you will notice one thing that they do to help you a little bit is that level 1 and like the levels and phases are written in Arabic numerals. So like our classic like numbers, like 1, 2, 3, right? Whereas the stages are Roman numerals. You'll see like IV. So you get like your stages are always going to be Roman numerals, and then your zones are back to like sort of the classic Arabic numerals. Level 1, which is a client in phase 1, you are going to do a stage 1 cardio routine. Now, stage 1 only consists of 1 tool in that tool belt, and that is zone 1. What is zone 1? Zone 1 is 65 to 75% of your heart rate max, right? Or you can think of it as an RPE of between 12 and 13. Or you can think of it as I should be able to talk during the talk test comfortably. You should be able to maintain a conversation during the talk test, right? So that's stage 1. So if we were to write that routine out for a client, right? If I were to write, remember our client Ethan, right? He's the kid with tight calves, hip flexors, and lats from Friday. So if he's in his first month, right? This is his first month routine, which is a stage 1 routine. Then we're putting him in phase 1 here, obviously. First cardio day he ever shows up, we're going to foam roll those calves, right? Remember, we're going to foam roll because we got to start with the right flexibility. And we're going to do static stretches because, again, he's in stabilization. So stabilization does corrective flexibility, right? So we static stretch the calves, hip flexors, and lats. Then we need to get him into his cardio workout. So we're going to warm up on the treadmill 50 to 60% of his heart rate max, because that's the warm up, right? That's below a 12 to 13 on the RPE scale. We're only at like, remember I said exercise begins around like an 11, right? Like that's a warm up. Actual exercise, right, where we consider like you should be able to hold a conversation, 12 to 13. So that's that 65 up to 75% of your heart rate max, right? So we work out on the treadmill for 30 minutes at 65 to 75% of their heart rate max, AKA when you're writing a routine, you go, all right, step one, get between 65 and 75% of your heart rate max. There is no step two, you know, like that's it, like done, you know. Stage one routines are really, really simple. That is sort of what people think of when they think of traditional like cardio. They think about like slogging it on the circuit, on the elliptical for an hour, you know. And that's fine. But that's also like, remember how I kind of harped on this on Friday? And I always talk about this where it's like, people think that the only type of stretches that are out there are static stretches. Like people, you know, people equate all stretching to just static stretching. And we just know that that's inaccurate, right? We know that there are more types of stretching. We got active isolated stretches, we got PNF, we got dynamic stretches, right? Well, a lot of people think that cardio is just go running and don't stop for 30 minutes. And we know that that's not true either. I think this is kind of just what we're seeing is that a lot of people just never get past that first month of training because they don't really have a future in mind. They don't really have a goal. They don't have like, you know, targets to hit. And so they practice, they lose passion, and then it's over, you know? So you just need to do 30 minutes at 65 to 75% of their heart rate max. So in this example, we picked treadmill, but I very, very easily could have built a circuit here, right? I could do, you know, a resistance section and build them a circuit training that is designed to get the heart rate elevated, but not take it into zone 2. I just keep it around zone 1 to get them a little bit of recovery, and they kind of bounce and coast between that. Bodyweight circuit would really work. Functional circuit would work really well. Or maybe I do like a multi-mode style training. Maybe instead of just doing 30 minutes on the treadmill, it's like, all right, we're going to do the cardio sampler. You're going to do 5 minutes on the treadmill, 5 minutes on the elliptical, 5 minutes on the rower, 5 minutes on the Stairmaster, 5 minutes on a spin bike, and 5 minutes on a recumbent bike. Boom, 30 minutes, you know, and they bounced around the gym like crazy. It's a little weird. People might stare, but hey, they didn't get bored. Their E on that fit principle was high. And then we're going to cool down, still on the treadmill, right? Do their foam rolling on their calves, hip flexors, and lats, and then static stretch those things, and then get out of the gym. So in the end, they're probably doing, you know, there's probably a 10, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of stretching to warm up, 5 to 10 minutes of stretching to cool down, 5 minutes on the treadmill to warm up, 5 minutes on the treadmill to cool down, 30 minutes in the middle. It's about an hour altogether, right? Nothing too crazy, about 50 minutes, I think, overall. So when we consider our frequency, right, this is a pretty basic routine. They could very easily do 3 days of this per week, right? Especially if they're trying to simply like burn a lot of calories and establish like a baseline. So maybe on Monday, they do their workout A. On Wednesday, they do their strength training workout B. And on Friday, they do their strength training workout C. So let's say this is your classic like chest, back, and then leg day. Hey, really quick, by the way, just addressing that. You want to make sure you don't run into traffic at the gym. Put leg day on Monday. Like Monday is classic international like men's bench press day. So if you want to make sure you don't run into like traffic, don't put your bench press on Monday. It's also generally everybody's favorite move, like because people are obsessed with it. Put it on a Friday. That way you continue working out through the whole week. You have something to look forward to. There's your weird pro tip that's not in a book for the day. So there's a classic month 1 routine. Now let's say Ethan, our example client here, he moves into month 2. Month 2, we're going to give him a stage 2 routine. So now he's moving into phase 2. So the phases he's training in are going to be stabilization, strength, endurance, and then he's going to move into power. He's skipping hypertrophy and max strength. So he's in phase 2, which corresponds to level 2. Level 2 clients, you know what they get? They get stage 2 cardiorespiratory routines. Now, stage 2 cardiorespiratory routines are actually going to incorporate small parts of stage 1 by having zone 1 still be part of the picture here. Because nobody can just go do 85% of their max heart rate for 30 minutes, right? We want to work our way up to maybe 30 minutes of cardio, but we can't just be like, all right, run really hard, get out of breath, and stay out of breath. You know, we got to have varying intensity. We got to go up and down. So we are introducing interval training here. Now, I will say this, stage 2 is not the same as HIIT training, but it is interval training. So a lot of times people think that those are also the same thing. HIIT training is high intensity interval training. It's working super hard and working super gentle to make sure that you recover so that you can work super hard again. This is a little bit in the middle. It's undulating, but it's not doing this, right? It's little waves. And that's stage 2. So Ethan's still got overactive calves, hip flexors, and lats. So we are going to foam roll those. But because he's in phase 2, which is level 2, he's not doing static stretches, right? He's doing active stretches. So we do an active calf, hip flexor, and lat stretch. Put him on the treadmill, still 50 to 60% of his heart rate max. We're just warming him up. And then we've got his conditioning phase of cardio now and his recovery phase of cardio, right? We got a high intensity and we got a low intensity. And that way we're doing our interval training. So we would have him do 7 rounds of each, 1 minute of the high intensity, 3 minutes of the low intensity. He's spending 3 times as much low intensity work as he is with his high intensity work. So that's a 1 to 3 work to rest ratio, which corresponds pretty well with the strength level, because that's really allowing him to build up a lot of lactic acid here. And then he gets to recover and pull all that lactic acid, let it pool out of his body, not pool out of his body, let it work its way out of the body by being converted into ATP. And what's nice about that is that means that he'll be recovered and he can then work really hard again once he gets back into that conditioning phase. So let's see, that's 4 minutes times 7. So yeah, it's about 28 minutes. So instead of it's still 30 minutes of cardio, right? But it's a little more gentle, right? And so, and we could change this, by the way, like it doesn't have to be a 3 minute. You can do a 1 to 2 ratio as well. 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4 if your client's like having a hard time learning how to do it. But generally that's the type of like work to rest ratio we usually focus on in the stage 2 cardio routines. This is kind of the classic example that's in your books. They always use, like, I think the one in your textbook is a 1 to 3 example. So you would say, all right, like Ethan, I want you to be at 76 to 85%, and I want you to recover at 65 to 75. Now, again, that's pretty good. But if we were being really specific with our client, right, we would give them their actual target heart rate. So again, like I'm just going to use the Karvinen formula from earlier. Let's say Ethan is 18 years old, right? So 220 minus 18, and his resting heart rate is 65 beats per minute, right? So we take another 65 off of there, and we multiply that by, I'm gonna go in the middle. So his conditioning phase, we'll say is 80%. So times 0.8 plus, what was his resting heart rate? What did I say, 65? So we would say I want your heart rate to be 174 when you are working hard. So I want you to do around 174 for 1 minute. And then I want you to recover minus 18 minus 65 times 0.7 plus 65. I want you to be between 160 and 174. I want your heart rate to be 160 when you're recovering, 174 when you're working. Sounds pretty high, by the way. Remember, teenager. So that's pretty good, right? Now, here's an example of where we did make it slightly more complicated in the cardio routine down here when we did like our full month, right? So we have like week 1 and week 2 here. So again, he's doing a classic ABC split, right? Chest day, leg day, back day. So workout A, workout B, workout C. And then he's doing a stage 1 cardio routine on one day and a stage 2 cardio routine on another day. So here's the thing. We're not just giving our client stage 2. I know that he qualifies for stage 2, but we do not want to overtrain our client. So we're going to alternate between doing stage 1 workouts and stage 2 workouts. So he's going to go back to his first routine on Tuesday, Then he's going to get his new routine on Thursday. That's this one right here, right? And then he goes back to stage 1 on Saturday. Next week, we switch that dynamic, right? So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And we just repeat. And then we got month 3 here. And now Ethan has moved from strength endurance into power. He is, you know, we're peaking before the season, right? This is the most intense stuff right before he's about to go into the season. So same muscles, right? Calves, hip flexors, and lats, right? Remember, it's the same client, but they're in phase 5 now. We're going to do dynamic stretches this time as part of his warm-up. So we have him do a little bit of heel walk, maybe some walking lunges, butt kickers, straight leg kicks, and arm circles, right? Just a little bit of something, 2 sets, 10 reps each, nothing too crazy. And then we're going to do 10 rounds of a 1-to-2 ratio here, where he is working between each thing. So this is going to be 30 minutes again, because he's doing 1 round in his super intense stuff. He's going to try to continue pushing it for 1 round with his medium intense stuff. And then he's doing 1 round of low intense to fully get recovered, so he can go all the way back to that super high intense round. Now, I will say this about this routine. This is the example that's in your textbooks. I personally am not a huge fan as someone who kind of likes cardio. This is great for a long distance runner. So this Ethan guy, this Ethan character that we've kind of made up here, very much probably like a cross country athlete or like maybe a long distance runner, track athlete. If I had a soccer player even, which is, you know, there needs to be endurance, but there also needs to be intensity. If I had a soccer player or a football player or a baseball player, I probably wouldn't be doing this style. I would probably do much more traditional like HIIT style training, where I would go 1 minute here, and I would probably, or I'd actually probably wouldn't try to push that for 1 minute, because if I want them at 86 to 95, I'd probably, honestly, I'd probably take that down to 30 seconds because I want them to work super, super hard. And then I'd probably give them a 5 times ratio. I'd probably give them 2.5 minutes rest before I made them come all the way back. And I would just blow right through zone 2 here. So I'd probably just go from 1 to 3 if it were me. And that workout's going to be much more intense rather than be very, very, very cardio based. And that just means that I'm working on speed and intensity rather than endurance. But if this is cross country runner, then this is great. You know, this is totally exactly what I need to do.
The sets wouldn't change, Brad. They would still be at 10.
Oh no, I'd probably have to, no, because I'd do probably 30 minutes. So I'd say a 1 to 5 ratio. So that'd be 2.5 minutes. That means every round would be 3. Yeah, no, 10. Coincidentally, yes. That was not on purpose. It did still come out to 10 minutes. Or did it? Yeah, no, it did. Yeah, sorry. So then I cool them down. And here, same concept, right, guys? So we'd have workout A, workout B, workout C, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then they would do a stage 1 routine on Tuesday, a stage 2 routine on Thursday, and a stage 3 routine on Saturday. So it's not that you go, like when you look at your months in terms of how you're doing cardio, it's not that you're going 1, 2, 3. You're going 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, right? You're incorporating, you're using all the old stuff. Just like in the same way that we use static stretches, even though we're in phase 5 during our cool down, right? Because we're you know, the workout's over, we want to make sure that we're still working on all that other stuff that we established as a baseline. You don't want to lose your foundation when you move to more advanced training. And that's honestly, that's kind of a review there. You guys can see that here, right? So stage 1, which is level 1, you do stage 1, that has zone 1 in it. That's 65 to 75. Level 2, which could be phases 2 or 3 or 4, So if your client's in strength endurance, hypertrophy, or max strength, you're going to use zones 1 and 2. And if your client's in level 3, you're going to use zone 3, zone 2, and zone 1. Do you guys have any questions?
I do. The stage 3, the zones need to go in that order. Like I saw in the OPT model that you start at zone 3 and work zone 2 and zone 1. You don't work zone 1 first. Is the dynamic stretching the warm up before you go right into the zone 3?
Yeah, you totally could. It depends on like where you put your priorities. NASM doesn't do it that way. NASM and I both do this kind of the same way. Since you've just finished warming up, I like to just take them right into their first hard one because their heart rate's low already. So then you can spike it and then you get into the workout. You could very easily like ease in as well. And what's great about that is that when you're at the end of your workout, like the version you're describing, what works really well about that is when you're done with your workout, it's like, all right, let's say they're doing their last bit of recovery and it's like, this is it. Your final intense round is coming up. We're going to crush it. And then we're going to cool down and you're going to get out of the gym. And then they're like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Like that's the benefit to what you're describing is that like, they kind of get it's a good like mental thing to focus on at the end of the routine. I personally like doing it the other way around because it also means I can usually squeeze one more intense round in without having to do the recovery afterwards because they can just go right into their cool down. But that's user preference, whatever you think is best.
Okay, so depending on the athlete's goal, we can switch around this zone 1, zone 3, zone 2, however we want to do it.
Absolutely. And you can also, you don't have to use these. I used in this the examples that are in your textbook, which is just, they keep it really simple. It's like 1 minute, 1 minute, everything's 1 minute. Right. You can do 45 seconds. What's important is the ratio.
Go between zone 3, zone 2, and then do a zone 1 at your cool down or whatever, right?
Totally, yeah. Like one of my favorites, remember I've mentioned it before, but fartlek training, which is, I know, a very weird word, but fartlek. If you look at a fartlek, it's equal parts work with equal parts rest. So you can see here, this person's simplifying it to fast and slow. But they would do, 30 seconds fast, 30 seconds slow. Why are they doing 2 rounds? Don't pay attention to that first one, but I guess they were trying to just make it 4 minutes or whatever, or total 30 minutes. But 30 fast, 30 slow, 1 fast, 1 slow, 2 fast, 2 slow, and you just repeat. This is a little off, actually. That's almost good. It's almost, that's still legit. That actually is still a fartlek. It's just not the classic. The original version was just, that's so funny. I can't find, I thought it'd be so easy to find like a picture of it. The original version was 30, 30, 60, 60, 90, 90, 60, 60, and then repeat. And so it's like a little pyramid. Actually, that's not even true 100%. That's the timed original. The original was actually, if I'm not mistaken, I could be mistaken, the original was 200 meter sprint, 200 meter jog, 400 meter sprint, 400 meter jog, 600 or maybe 800, and same. So that's a classic interval, right? And that's called speed play. That's what fartlek means actually in Swedish. But yeah, you could do any times that you want of your choice, and you could always start hard or start easy. That's totally up to you. These are just kind of the classic examples that are in chapter 7 of your textbook. Any other questions, guys? That was a good one. Nothing? Well, I know it's a little brief today, but that's honestly all I got for you. Tomorrow, I think we're doing a double chapter. If I'm not mistaken, let me check just to make sure. Tomorrow's a double day. So we'll be very on task, and we'll kind of work our way through movement prep plus SAQ. But other than that, I'll see all you guys tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Have a nice
Yeah,
day.
of course.
Yeah. Have a good one, guys.